Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast, Growing Up Boston, with my brother
David Donahue
from...
New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I'm in Nebraska right now. It's cold, David. It was 10 below zero without the wind chill yesterday.
We're
Today's
about
supposed to
at
be...
1 degree, so yeah. Not really feeling you.
You get the ocean breeze too. It makes it worse, I guess. But yeah, no, it's been really cold. So, but yeah, it's been fun. I like the winter. I actually really
I
I
do
think that's
too.
kind
I
of
like it a
really...
little colder. I'm not a big fan of the heat. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the feedback that we got from last week's podcast, because I part of this for me is like some of these stories. I'd like them to be teachable moments, or I did get some feedback where other people had issues with the same teacher, and that's always good because it kind of like exposes, some of the, this was not a one-off with that science teacher.
No,
So,
that stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. So
right. So, and that's one of our goals here, is to kind of shed some light on some dark subjects, and try to incorporate a little levity, if you can, into that. But I was encouraged by a couple of people that reached out to me with similar experiences. So
yeah.
yeah.
I didn't get any of that, but I did read some of those things that you read them to me, and I'm glad. Yeah, you're right. It's like you want people to... I mean, I think a lot of people have buried, things that happened to them growing up. And it's not like we're trying to rub it in everybody's face, but some of those things have influenced, their lives, and it's easy to sweep that stuff under the rug and not deal with it. And I think sometimes it's good to talk about, what happened and how it shaped you,
Yeah,
and
no
how it's...
doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, we want to do this week kind of talk about our babysitters. One of the funny things, when we start reminiscing, you and I, it is funny but tragic at the same time. And this is... and just for a trigger warning for those of you that are watching this podcast, we're probably going to flip around a lot with, some deeper subjects, but there's levity in the middle of those things, right? I mean, it's tragic that we had babysitters that were so crazy, and we'll get into that. But also, there was some funny moments that happened that, we laugh about to this day. Like the one that's just famous in our family is being woken up at like 2:00, 3:00 in the morning after our mom had gone out, and then we had a babysitter, and we'll leave her name out of it. But well, I guess we can bring her first name up, but it was Sally, and she was a bit odd. And I remember coming downstairs and mom like screaming and like yelling because Sally was on drugs, and she had put her shoes in the oven, and she was out in front of the oven looking at her shoes being cooked. And I remember that. I remember coming down, looking at her, going, "What?" And then Alice freaked out and threw all of us in the back of the Fairlane 500, that old piece of crap, and drove down. And we had to drive Sally home, and mom was yelling at her the whole time, and we were just like little kids. And that was just... our babysitter was cooking her shoes.
Nice. Yeah. I barely remember that. I know it's one of our family um, moments. But we had other babysitters. These people were just checked out. So part of Sally's deal was that this was the 60s and everybody was dropping acid, and she was just like a flower child gone wrong kind of thing, right?
Gone wrong. She was pretty. I remember that.
I don't really remember her. I remember her family. I remember you were friends with her younger brother.
Yep.
He was a tough nut in the neighborhood, Jimmy. And I remember his mother. Her mother was, a little off the hook too. But just, this was just, part of the reason why we had all these babysitters is my mom chose to work 3 to 11. So, so we weren't just latchkey kids. We were, Mom was on an opposite schedule sometimes with us, and so and some of the people that she chose to watch us when we were young, and they were just not. It wasn't high quality daycare. It was, the
to say
neighborhood.
the least.
Right, right. I just remember some of them being so, off the hook, and they were kids. They were kids raising us, basically.
Yeah, they were 12, 13 years old. They were
Right,
relatives. Some of them were relatives of
right.
like like second cousins of second cousins or whatever, and we didn't even know who they were, and all of a sudden they were taking care of us. And I remember a couple times being scared because the girl they were pretty girls most for most part. And so these obviously when you get pretty girls around, you get boys. So I remember these teenage boys like scouting them, like all of a sudden they were in our neighborhood and they were scouting these girls out, and then there was some crazy stuff that happened. I remember one of the babysitters had promised us to go to the beach or something or go to a pool or something like that. And then her boyfriend was standing next to her, and I brought it up. I said, "Are we going to the beach or the pool or whatever it was?" And this guy was drunk. I remember he was intoxicated, and he just punched me in the face
Yeah,
like I was a man.
I
He
remember
was
that.
probably 17 years old. Like I was 8, you know. I was a small kid,
Yeah.
and he punched me like I was a man. Like he
It
just
was in
dead.
front of Sky's Taxi in Weymouth
Yeah,
Landing.
yeah,
Right. He was a cabbie.
yeah,
And one of our babysitters was like a part time dispatcher. Um,
yeah,
you know, like I said, not high quality. They were cabbies. She's
yeah.
a dispatcher at a cab stand. Um, yeah, I remember that. The guy's name was Carl, the guy that hit
Oh,
you.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember
Yeah,
that
that was a crazy
explicitly.
day. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like I mean, story after story of basically these these adults that was supposed to be watching us, but they should have been watched themselves. I mean, they had no business, being around children. Um, you know,
and mom, her threshold for um, making sure that her children were safe was really high. And it ended when Patty, our younger sister, crawled out on the second story out of the bedroom window. And you went out and got her. Um, so, and that's when I guess, according to mom, that's when she drew the line and said, I can't work this shift anymore. I'm not even sure, we talk about this a lot. Why she chose that shift? Because it was, like I said, the opposite of our schedule. We were in school from 7 to 3, and I remember coming home from grade school, and there'd be a pot of something simmering on the stove with nobody around, and we were just fending for ourselves. I mean, that was sort of her contribution to parenthood, was to leave a pot of Swedish meatballs simmering on the
yeah,
stove. I mean, I remember we didn't see her much
yeah.
during that time, and I remember being at Hunt School, so I was still in grade school
Well,
when that
she
happened.
stopped the babysitter parade, but she didn't stop working.
Right.
So, and then she made Karen, our oldest sister,
She leaned in on Karen,
yeah,
right?
and Karen was parentified, and that didn't work because I was
No.
too close. I was a year younger than Karen, and so I didn't see her as any kind of authority. So there was a natural conflict with us, and then, yeah, I mean, it
I mean,
was
and she was 12. I
crazy.
mean, she was
Yeah,
ill prepared.
right.
It was just completely irresponsible. And I think it goes back to the fact that mom was overwhelmed with 4 children and, uh, not having a husband, not having an intact family, if you will. And
Yeah, and let's just be clear, dad didn't pay child support at all, like not a dime, the whole
right,
time. I
right,
mean, the whole time. So,
right,
and he was MIA. So he wasn't there emotionally, physically, or financially. And so, not to, give her excuses, but that was a burden. And back in those days, they didn't chase those guys down like they do now. I mean,
right.
they chase them down and garnish their pay and go after them. But in the 70s, they didn't do that. So
Well, I
he was
guess
a
too,
free
the
agent.
story goes that that dad knew the sheriffs and all the cops, and they were less than zealous about serving him with, child support papers.
Yeah.
So, and then I mean, mom could have pursued it a little bit more, but the 3 to 11 thing was, she didn't have to work those hours, and she wanted to because she wanted some kind of independence. And I mean, I guess on some level I get that, but that wasn't my fault. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
circumstances of her marrying this deadbeat, and then being overwhelmed with 4 children, um, was not anything that I did. And so from the community, some people had mom on a pedestal, like she was this saint. Your mother, she's this, she's that, she works, and takes care of you kids. Well, and in retrospect, that's kind of what she was supposed to do. So, I mean, she was sort of put on a pedestal for just being a parent, and we were supposed to feel like grateful for that.
Yeah, nobody really knew what was going on behind closed doors because there was violence. I mean,
Oh yeah,
there
yeah,
was a
right.
lot of violence. There was a lot of hitting, yelling, screaming,
Tirades,
threatening. Yeah, yeah, tirades. I mean, threatening to leave us.
right.
There was a lot of that stuff that was going on.
Right. Your kids are going to go to foster care, blah, 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 and I remember feeling helpless. Like, what can I do? I'm 11. Um, so right. I mean, we were talking earlier. I remember getting on a step stool and washing my own clothes at probably 8 or 9.
Yeah,
We had
figuring out
to.
the wash machine, right? Figuring
Right.
out how it works.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. There was a lot of just basic survival going on in our house,
yeah,
and violence. You're right, a lot of violence, a lot of and I mean, it couldn't have turned out any differently. You don't leave 4 children alone, 40 hours a week to fend for themselves.
right.
You just, it's just, yeah.
And again,
So
these babysitters that she brought in, and even what wasn't just for work, like when she'd go out and party with her friends and stuff, and or go on dates or whatever. And I remember one of them like cooked fudge or something, and they used every pot in the house, and they were cooking. It was like a meth lab in our kitchen. They were just making a bunch of fudge. I think it was fudge, but they were putting pot and shit in it. And our mom came home and just tirade. I mean, just like those girls were like running out of the house, and because Alice was going off.
but they weren't
Yeah,
fit to watch children. They
yeah.
weren't, right,
And
right.
there
So
was some sexual abuse. I remember one of them bringing me down to the woods and wanting me to do things with her. And she was probably 14, 15. I was 7, 8, 9, something. I don't even remember, but somewhere in that range. I know it wasn't over 10. And I didn't know what was going on. And, it was sexual abuse. I mean, it
right,
was. I
right,
mean,
right,
but it was crazy. It was just nuts. Um, and I think, the silver lining is, I don't know. I don't want to put a bow on this because it feels a little phony, but there is the silver lining is that we drew a lot of our own resiliency through our those tough times. I remember learning how to survive life through that way. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody.
of course,
I wouldn't put
right,
that in a teaching form. Um,
right.
but we both are pretty tough people, and we've gotten through some tough times, and I think part of it's that we just learned how to
Right.
survive.
So, the early independence, and we've talked about this before. I remember one of my best friends, was like, we were sort of trauma bonded. I hate that, it's a little cathartic, but and her mother was in a mental institution, and her father had taken off with a secretary. So I was living there, like 14, 15 years old, living in this house with another teenager. And I remember being like 14 years old, driving the mother's car around, like
Jeez.
like going to work in this car. I remember there was a there was a recall on the fenders of this 1977 Volvo. What was it, a Plymouth something? Anyway, I took it to Chrysler. I was in the dealership demanding that they change the front fenders because I heard about the recall. I'm 14.
but
I mean,
that's
it's
what I'm
funny, but
saying.
I
I
mean, I
mean,
could have
you
been killed, you
yeah,
know?
you look yeah, they coulda taken you yeah, we'll change the fenders, come here. Yeah,
Mike, I failed my driver's license because I had adapted bad habits from driving for 2 years before I was eligible to drive. You know what I mean? Like, I remember I failed because I looked out the window this way and I was supposed to look out this way, but this is how I've been driving. You
right.
know, like just
Bad habits.
yeah, bad habits at 14, right? So,
Yeah,
um, and there was the other part to that is it was really nobody looking for me. So,
yeah,
I was living this independent life, and I'm looking back at some of the pictures behind us, at exactly how young I was and how, there's a picture of me where I think I'm like 15 or 16 years old. And I was just a little adult
yeah.
driving around. I remember I was so young that I was running out of gas on the highway, and I thought if I put my foot on the pedal harder, I'd get to the gas station quicker. But I was using up all the gas, right? But that's where my mind was. I
Right,
was this little kid going, okay, if I go faster, I'll get there quicker. You know,
yeah. But,
yeah,
and that underscores the whole lack of male influence in our lives. Like, we coulda really used a grandfather or an uncle or somebody or dad, but I mean, but he was gone, so, like, that could've, like, taught us some of those things, and then what I resented a lot was the fact that we would mess up on some of that stuff, right? Fail the driver's test or whatever, kinda have a POFAR or what's the word? That's not the word, but just
so
make a
far,
mistake, whatever, yeah, um and then we would get criticized for it, like, "Oh, you boys, you don't know what you're doing." Well, yeah, it would've been nice. Most kids in our neighborhood, I don't wanna name them, but they had dads, they had uncles, they had people in their lives that would take them fishing and taking them doing things, and
right?
we didn't have that, so
Just the
I
just
didn't
the lack of financial support alone, you can take
right,
that little piece out of it. Even if dad was who he was, unavailable, blah blah blah. Um, it was the lack of financial support, just one little piece to
right,
to all of that, right?
which would've
So
would've probably brought some stability. She wouldn't have to work, she could've been there more, which that's iffy about whether that's good or not. But basically, we were left to fend for ourselves. But what I again didn't like at all was the criticism that came towards us when we weren't civilized or but nobody was helping us. So
right,
whatever. So
you're not being an
I
adult
kind of
quick enough,
developed this hard shell. I developed this like I don't care. Like I don't care. I did care, but I didn't think anybody else did. So I just acted like I didn't care. Like there was like this tough guy, don't touch me attitude. But really, I was just scared to death. I was scared to
right,
death.
right,
As
right.
you know,
And that the frightened part was a natural, normal reaction to being thrust into an adult world that we just weren't
that
ready. I
that
mean,
guy
it's just
punched me in the face. Like that was like I'm 8, right? So you
right,
just learn. You get up and you go, okay, all right, that's what life is, and you you figure it out, and you get hard, you get tough, and I don't like that. I mean that doesn't translate in the real world when you're trying to, I was in the military and I got that, that pushed out of me a little bit because you can't come in to normal. And that was probably what was hard was coming into normal relationships and trying to bring that philosophy of survival philosophy into normal relationships. People were like, what the hell? Why are you so angry? Why, like, I'd scorched earth anytime anybody would come at me with something. I'd be like, ah! I'd freak out because that's how I did it growing up, right?
right.
And I had to kind of relearn.
And that's what we saw. If anybody ever criticized mom, she went ballistic.
Yeah,
I learned that. I learned how to, somebody even constructive criticism I take way too personally. I'm
yeah,
still working on that, and I'm 60 years old, right?
yeah.
So
Dave, you're
yeah,
60. You look good.
shut up.
Oh yeah, we had. Those of you that are watching this, we had. It was a crazy time. It was crazy. Crazy people, crazy characters came in to our lives too. Like some of the boyfriends, we should do a whole segment on that. But remember that time you woke up? It was Christmas morning, and one of her boyfriends was passed out drunk. Did he knock down the tree,
Knocked
or
down
was
the
he under the
tree. I
tree?
was up waiting for Santa. That's how young I was, right? So Freddie Bennett, you
Don't
know,
mention names.
um, Freddie, we'll call him Freddie,
Uncle Freddie.
Uncle Freddie, uh, somehow broke into the back door of the kitchen, and he actually, was stumbling around the living room. He didn't see me, and he practically landed on me. I'm 6 years old, waiting for Santa. Like,
We kind of looked like Santa, like, body wise. Like he was a big. Wasn't he big? He was a big
he was
guy.
big. I
Yeah.
remember asking him when he was going to have his baby.
Wonder he fell on you. Oh,
What?
bastard. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The
yeah.
characters, man, that came into our lives.
Oh
Didn't
my
she date
God.
somebody that had a step van and he was,
Oh, Oh yeah. Peter.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember him drinking. What do you call it?
screwdrivers.
Screwdrivers, driving around, yelling at people jogging and whatever. And Patty and I are in the back of the van. We're like, this is before we were in school, so we must have been like 4 and 5, just bouncing around the back of this step van that was turned into one of those like, hey baby, was customized to be like this love trap, right?
Was he a shag carpets in there and stuff? Like, yeah, like
He
a
was like a
lava lamp,
'70s walking cliche. You know what I mean?
like a lava lamp in there.
um, yeah, yeah.
I remember one of her
Um,
boyfriends, we called him Turk the Jerk. He was,
oh, he was an idiot.
yeah, I remember him somebody cut him off or something in the parking lot, and he got out of the car and just, I think he fought the guy or he was gonna, I
Did
don't know.
he?
But yeah,
Yeah,
he was
I mean,
pretty
how were
violent.
we ever in his car? It was a Volkswagen Bug. Like,
That's right. David, you got a memory for that stuff. That's crazy. Yeah, it was.
yeah, yeah. Turk
Yeah,
the
he was
jerk.
great. Yeah. We down
He
the Cape
called,
or
yeah,
something.
he called you and me house apes, and
Yes.
Patty and Karen house
No.
house mice.
Yeah.
Yeah, weirdo,
Yeah.
weirdo.
Yuck. Yeah.
I mean, the pickings were slim. Mom had 4 kids in a station wagon with full ball tires. Like
Yeah. It wasn't exactly a prize.
right.
Didn't hit the lottery.
Yeah,
And we were
right, right.
wild. I mean, we were wild kids. I remember, David, I remember this. I remember some boyfriends of hers would come over. I don't know if they were boyfriends or they were just guys that was sniffing around trying to be boyfriends, but a couple of them had nice cars. And mom was pretty, she's a very pretty lady, and she drew some attention. And I remember you and I kind of had this little scheme. We would get it like a pail of water and the hose out and stuff, and we go, hey, we want to wash your car for you, hoping that they would give us some money for washing his car, but they didn't want us to touch his car. So he would go, well, listen, I'll just give you the money, don't touch my car. Like, well, but he'd give us
Whatever
$5.
makes you
five
feel
bucks back then
better.
was like 20 today. What's that?
So whatever makes you feel better,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
And
that
mom
was a
mom would
hustle.
kind of look at side eye us because she knew what we were up to,
That
and
was a
she
hustle, man.
oh, total hustle, total hustle. We knew how to get money out of those guys. Like, if they're coming over to sniff on mom, let's work it.
Yeah, we always used to get either the leftover Chinese food in the morning,
Yes.
or what was that guy? I think it was the funeral director. He was a tall guy. He used to
Yeah.
bring. We used to call him Donut Man because he come
Donuts.
over with a dozen donuts.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, we liked him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then White Shoes, wasn't there a guy,
He was a
uh,
golfer. Yeah,
golfer? He's a pro
yeah,
golfer. Yeah, he
yeah,
was sniffing on mom for a while.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, it must have been tough for her trying to, and it didn't help that she was still attracted to another variant of dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
and her dad,
they were all
alcoholic.
losers,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Pretty
you
much.
know,
I don't remember any of them being, and none of them took interest in you and I that I remember.
no,
Um, I don't remember any of that. I do remember a couple of cops in the neighborhood. Actually, I will mention this guy's name because he was a good cop. The motorcycle cop, Bob Coyle. and his grandson actually plays for the Boston Bruins right now, Charlie
Yeah,
Coyle.
yeah,
But his that Bob Coyle was a good guy.
yeah. He was.
He would come by with his motorcycle. We were all enamored by his motorcycle, and he would come by and park it in front of our house and get out and talk to us. And that was pretty cool that he would spend some time. It wasn't deep or anything, but I don't remember it being deep conversations. But he just took interest in us, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Right,
There was
right.
some people in
Yeah.
that neighborhood. I'll mention Joe Goff, Jack Goff. We got to be careful how you say that, but that was his
How
name.
come we never picked up on that?
We
Jack
did.
off. I don't remember. I mean, it's
It-
it would
Hung
have been
out
perfect.
with his son Joey, but Jack was a good guy. He was a good. I don't remember him ever being inappropriate with mom or anything.
No,
No, he was
no.
a good dude. He would lend me tools when I was working on stuff. He would always be. I mean, we didn't have deep conversations, but he was always good to me. And so
Yeah.
there were some good people too in that neighborhood that were helpful to us. It
They
wasn't a
were
lot of them.
aware of our plight, and they tried to do whatever they could. I
Yeah,
remember Mr. Bop would come over with stuff. So there were some good people definitely in that neighborhood.
yeah,
You
not a
know,
lot of them, but there was a couple that, we our head was on a swivel. I mean, we had to keep an eye on because we did have a pervert in the neighborhood that everybody knew he was. I mean, you were hurt by him, and we'll probably
hmm
go into that at some point, but I mean, and there was I mean, there was a long list of people that got molested by this guy, and people, and the cops back then were like, just leave him alone, just
right. He's
don't
an
mess
old
with him.
man. He's an old man. Keep your kids away from him. Right,
Yeah, today he
right.
would be
That
locked
was
up.
it.
It doesn't matter if he's 80; they would lock his up. But back then, we got the message that it was our fault because we were in his yard. He has a right to do these things that were horrible because we're in his yard. Like that was so.
He was a mess. His whole family was a
Yeah.
mess. We taunted him too. Banging on his as we got older, banging on his
But
windows.
that was it, David. That was retribution.
Right.
That was our answer to it
Of
was
course it
wrong. I
was.
get it. But that was our way of going, "Hey, listen, cops, if you're not going to do something about this, we're going to." And
Right.
so we did.
Right.
We tortured that guy.
Without
And
knowing it, right.
yeah.
There had to be some kind of retribution. I remember getting a bag of dog shit and lighting it on his step, and he'd come out, put it out.
Again, goes back to the adult. They didn't protect children the way they do now.
No,
And we were part of that culture. We were kind of like dismissed as anything valuable, right? We were just commodities.
his
And
was secondary. All
right.
right. Yeah.
At school, we talked about it last week, with teachers that were just, that would marginalize us. And then these neighbors that were like, if you get in their yard, they get to do stuff to you. What
Right.
the hell?
Yeah.
Like today they don't do that, and which is great, but we're products of that environment,
A different era
babysitters,
that there was
everybody. I mean,
permission.
babysitters could abuse us, it didn't matter.
Permission. Permission. There was a
Right,
cultural permission.
exactly right.
Without
Priests, I mean, the priests were diddling kids. It was common. David, I mean, we knew that. We all knew that. Like street level, the way we talked about it was we would call them. We had euphemistic names for them, right?
right,
Father and
right.
you know, pastor pervert, and we would just say it. Would laugh about it. It was like it was a joke in our in our culture, in our teenage culture
Yeah.
back in South Boston, Massachusetts.
I
That's how
remember
we looked
Paul
at it.
Shanley followed me home. He was one of the priests that got convicted, and he was actually killed in prison. But he followed me home. Uh, I was about 11, walking up Prospect Street, and I went in and I told mom, I'm like, Mom, this guy's outside. He followed me home. So she got pissed and we started following him, chasing him. And he ended up at this house in Braintree. So mom called the police, and it turned out that his mother, Paul Shanley's mother, lived in Braintree.
Yeah.
Um, so,
He's the
and the,
subject of that movie Spotlight. He's the first priest
right.
that they
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah. He followed me home. He did. Yeah.
Wow.
And the cop's answer was, well, he's a priest. He was just trying to minister to him.
Yeah.
That guy scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, yeah.
And
He didn't.
it
He
wasn't
wouldn't
just
say
him.
anything. He was just going. He was driving as fast as I was walking, and just like gripping the wheel, not saying anything, not doing anything. And I was like, what is this guy going to do?
Yeah.
And it was at a time when daylight savings just happened. So like November caught me off guard with the darkness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So it was just a really creepy, eerie episode, and and again, he just said, "Oh, he's a priest," so he was just trying to reach out to me.
Yeah. Reach
Sure he
out.
was, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and he wasn't the only one. There was I was when I moved out of the house. I worked at that restaurant, Great Escape. There was a priest that would park out behind the restaurant and wait for me to get off, and then give me a ride home. And I had to confront him because he definitely made him play. And I was, I, you know, I didn't I had already been, we'll talk about this at some point, but I had already been molested by other people, so I knew that wasn't part of gonna happen to me, and again, that was done. I was
Right.
done with that. And so
Yeah.
I let him know pretty clean
Yeah.
that
By the
I
time he
wasn't.
made the moves on me, I know what priest you're talking about. I was like, "Yeah, dude, no, not happening." Like he put his hand on my leg, and I just took it off because
Same priest, right? The same guy that
yeah,
wait
same
yeah,
guy, right? He
yeah.
was from a South Boston parish, and somebody in the Catholic Church probably said, if you want to, if you're going to do this, get out of town.
Yeah, he was
Don't
trolling the suburbs looking
suburbs,
for the
right?
boys.
Right.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
20 miles, probably 15, 20 miles away from his parish looking
In
for
South Boston, right?
yeah, looking for
Yeah.
boys. Yeah,
Um,
but, I mean,
and-
and again, it goes back to this is our culture. This is what we had. Our head was on a swivel. We were looking away, looking for priests, looking for people in the neighborhood, looking for babysitters that were awful. Like we were left unsupervised, so we were prey. I mean,
right.
we were you and I
And we had
both,
to figure it out. We
right?
had to, negotiate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to again put a bow on this, but one of the silver linings is that education that I got helps me today. Because when I walk into any environment, a school, I speak in schools. I've been into some pretty hairy stuff overseas. I did some filming for an organization, and we had to we're in the Philippines, and there was a situation where we were around some dangerous people, and as soon as this certain guy walked into the room, I knew we had to go. And the people that I was with were like, "What's the matter?" I'm like, "No, we got to go." I read this guy's eyes, and it goes back to the how we grew up. Like you and I both. When mom would bring babysitters or her boyfriends, or we were just around shady people, we would look at their eyes and know if this guy is somebody we could trust or not. And
Right.
you summed them up in 5 minutes.
Right. Not
And
even. Yeah.
that's what happened in the Philippines. I looked at this guy and went, "I'm out of
Yeah.
here." I started
Right.
packing my stuff, and I was like, "We gotta go."
Right.
And we did. And then it turned out those guys were bad mother effers. I mean, they were,
Yeah.
and so we got out of there just in time.
Yeah.
And that to me, that education I got growing up in South Boston helped me that day. And so
Yeah, I mean that is a silver lining. I would rather have grown up in Westchester County with a mom and dad and a Volvo
no,
turbo
no
wagon,
doubt.
but
The silver spoon up our ass. Right.
right. But if we're going to extrapolate anything from those experiences, it is an awareness. It is a reading the room. But that can go towards the other side too. You can call it wrong sometimes.
And I have.
So right.
Yep.
So have I. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
trust the wrong people.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
So
So
well, this is a good podcast, Davey D.
as usual, Mikey.
All right. Hey, listen, those of you that are watching this, I know we're young. This is a fourth podcast, but would love for you to leave a comment. Leave a comment and
Share it.
share it.
Just
Yeah.
one click to share it.
Yeah. And then like the page so you can get updates. We're gonna do some stuff. Dave and I got some ideas. We wanna you know, I think this might be a teaser, but we definitely at some point, David's done a lot of research. My brother David is brilliant, by the way, and he has done a lot of research on our family and both sides. My dad going back to some of the Goombas that were part of our family, and then back on my mom's side, going way
Murder
back to the
trials.
Mayflower. Oh yeah, it's crazy stuff David's unpacked. So we'll probably get into that
Yeah,
at some point. So, yeah, like our page and,
please.
you get updates. All right. David, stay warm.
I'm gonna. I will. Love you,
All right.
Mikey.
All right. Love you too, buddy.
Carry on.
Bye.